proudly hosted on Spotify.
What really got you inspired to get into supply chain?
So my dad's been in supply chain and logistics. He's been in it from all his life. He was actually a mechanic. So like when I say let's not do the glorified one. My dad also started down at basics. He was a diesel mechanic fixing trucks, and then obviously he just grew in supply chain. My mom worked for BP. So she was always like, if you could say retail is the fancy term, but my mom worked at a garage in, like at a BP. And so I think I've always been exposed to it on that level. And then straight out of university, one of my first internships was actually for Monte Eagle, also known as Spa, which is the Spa household brands. And that's when I was like, okay. And then I stuck with it because then I said to myself, like, I'll never be without a job, right? Because supply chain runs the world. Though supply chain is not exposed. It is like, if you think about it, like you can get into, or people study things like law and then they can't find a job, or criminal law, whatever it is. But if you look at something like supply chain, open your cupboard and where does food come from? You're always going to need food. Like it doesn't matter what the economy of scales are, you're always going to need it. So supply chain does run. But even if we look at like when we had COVID and now there's a new thing coming out and it's called pharmaceutical supply chain. All it is getting the right medication to the right places at the right time so that people can get treated correctly and that the correct amount of medication can be produced or whatever it is. So supply chain has always been around. It's just that over the past 10 years, I think or so, has it actually gained its attraction of what it is. Like even when you were speaking about like digitalization, and I laughed because I was saying to my husband, I was like, I remember when I started off in supply chain, and it's one of my answers. Like when I started off in supply chain, we would plan and forecast and do orders on Excel. Then we would manually capture it onto Sage. And now only do we have such solutions like SAP. Yes. Or like Barton or like BCX, and that's where these companies have now come about. But a few years ago, it actually wasn't there, and now it's there. So now it helps with like optimization, making sure the right stock is at the right place at the right time, mitigating risk, like doing all of that. But 15 years ago, we were still, like learning about all of that. So I started off straight out of university, and I was an order clerk. Like the buyer would give me an Excel spreadsheet or would print out a piece of paper and be like, capture this on Sage. And that's where, capture it in Pastel. And that's where I started, or File. And that's where I started 3 years ago. And then over the years, and I think I'm a quick learner, and I'd like to believe I'm a quick learner. So I got promoted and then it progressed. Then I started like from an order clerk, I then became like a junior planner, then a junior key accounts, then a supply chain planner, then a demand planner, then a key accounts executive. Then we relocated to Johannesburg. And so I've worked for Bluetooth companies, like blue chip companies like Spar, Toys R Us, and it's all their head offices. And then here in Johannesburg was Sweets from Heaven and our Famous Brands. And by the time I came up to Johannesburg, then it was like warehouse and operations. And now I'm at Famous Brands, but I'm back into like national supply chain planning, which is obviously getting the right quantity at the right place at the right time to the right stores.
Is the perception still like that? Do you find that people coming into the industry still don't?
Yeah, some of them still don't know. Like if we had to, like interns, for instance, that used to come into the company, and I used to say to an intern, okay, so do you know what a pallet is? No. Because like at a pallet is those wooden, they wouldn't even know like what a pallet is or what a warehouse is. And it's also because there isn't that exposure in school. And even if you're studying business economics is about balance sheets and cash flow and, those kind of things. But they don't actually tell you like, well, you know what, these things like what runs the world. Like my best friend, and she works for Spa. She's a new product developer. So, like with that new product development, it means she does things like, for instance, all of the ingredients, for instance, on the box. She's the one that will develop the packaging, and then she'll make sure that the ingredients are all on it.
Oh.
And like on a packet of sweets, there must be a certain glycemic carb, which is how much of sugar content can be on something. And she like went in to study that. So she started off with supply chain, but then she focused on new product development and went into that field, which is now called food technology. So, it's
so broad.
It's very, very broad. Or like somebody goes in and they're studying BCom accounting, and then later they come into supply chain, and yes, they come in as an accountant, but then sometimes because of their accounting background, they come more into planning, because planning is about the numbers, about knowing how much of stock to order or how much of raw materials is required for chocolate. So how much of cocoa, how much of sugar, how much of nuts, how much of whatever is needed to buy in order to put it into that.
Why is it that in varsity, do you think they leave it out, or students sort of forget that they need to now apply what they've learned? Or is it not taught?
I think it's not taught and it's not exposed. And that's where like skills development that, one of the best things, and it's a pity that it fell away many years ago when we were much younger. I don't know what's your age. I'm 36. But like they used to have that take a girl child to work. It started with Celsi, like where there was exposure and you would have to go to work with your parents and find out what it was that your parents did or like go to a company. And I believe like some of those things have fallen away, which was good things where that would have given exposure for the day. And it wasn't an internship. It wasn't anything. It would be you just going to a company for a day and finding out what is it that this company does. Or like if you studied business economics, they used to Pick and Pay, for instance, used to say, right, bring the grade 10s or grade 11s. You'd go there for a night and you do stock count at night.
Oh, yes.
Right? Do you remember those? And I feel, but those things
like
are
job shadow.
Yes, like job. And that has also fallen away. No, it's in private schools. It's not in public schools. So like in certain private schools, you have to have certain hours of, they call it, is it volunteer hours? But they got a fancy term. Community service. There we go. Yeah. Like say in private schools, it's like, okay, you have to do community service, but that has to do with like the SPCA or the volunteering at a children's home or something. And then you also have to do a certain amount of what they call vacation hours or back studies.
Why don't the public schools have that?
Very good question. Yes.
Because they need it.
Yes.
I mean, thinking there's not time during school holidays for them to even have that.
Yes, exactly that. So that's what like Lishlonga and I were also speaking about, because I used to say to him that was something my husband and I used to do at on a church level, because we did not know how else do we help the community. I mean, my husband and I used to do things like having the kids get tutored. So we'd go to like people in the church and be like, right, who's professionals here? Okay, you're an accountant, you're a this, you're a that. Right, great. The kids need help with mathematics. Like the kids, okay, so you're an engineer, you must be good at maths. You're an accountant, you must be good with maths. The kids, grandparents, go-go's cannot afford tuitions. So on a Saturday, what we're asking you is if you can come in 1 hour, you're going to do a tutoring session. And then Richfield came on board with us as well, and that in that year. And they came in and they did a rand for rand, which meant that if every student who matriculated and if they wanted to study in Richfield, whatever rand we put, Richfield would put. So if the year cost 20,000, the person would actually be paying 10. Wow. And then from that, they then broke it up further and they're like, okay, but you can pay this 10,000 rand, 3,000 rand deposit. And then the 10,000 rand, you can pay it over 9 months or 10 months. So then we went further back. And then my husband and I went to like the business people in the church and we're like, okay, or the professionals in the business. We're like, okay, if 2 families can give 500, that's 1,000 rand. And we started doing things like that in order to enable and put kids back and like just do exposure. And then we would do vocation days and career days, because we also said to them, listen, it's not just about this pen pushing jobs and sitting behind the pay. Like things like being a mechanic is also important, like skills development, like welders, like mechanics, like those kind of things. Yes, artisans, that's also just important. So then we would go to even the people at church that had little workshops, like the uncles that would run their little workshops, their little garages. And we'd be like, okay, can you come out? We'd give them a table, once again, table, flat cloth, right? Just talk to the kids, tell them what you do. Let's expose them so that they know that there is a lot more in the world. Or just because they do not qualify to be a doctor, lawyer, or accountant doesn't mean it's the end of their life. That there is other options, there is other careers, there is other options for them to actually do. And it's those kind of things that sometimes just going back to basics, if I could say, right. If I could put it like, okay, you go to Woolworths and you buy a packet of potatoes that you pop in the microwave, and the process of supply chain is from farmer to fork. So it's from the time you pick it up from the farmers to the time you eating it, and the whole process in between that, from raw materials to packaging to the logistics of it, all of that put together is supply chain, which is a big part of the world. And that's what I love about like associations like a Whisker, like African Women in Supply Chain and stuff like that, because with them, I feel like at least they've started to expose supply chain and they've started to say like, this is it. It should become a career field. And they're very big, which is why they have pledges. And one of the pledges is, are you going to mentor? Are you going to bring interns into your company? What are you actually going to do? Like things like that to bring exposure to supply chain. Because even if you go for open days or like things that come, like these organizations that come, I don't know if they still do it, but it used to come to schools. Most of it is like I say, it's the police force coming, a nursing field coming, like it's that kind of thing, the general thing. And then, like you are considered successful only if you're a doctor or a lawyer or an accountant, but yet, that a supply chain manager earns the same as what an accountant does. But people just don't know that because supply chain isn't right.
And how has the industry changed?
Like we say, one from digitalization, it's changed significantly because of back when I first started, it would be capturing orders on Excel. And then from Excel, you'd then capture it onto Pastel, and you'd have to save the PDF, and then you'd have to email it to a supplier. And now things have changed so much because of digitalization, because of AI, because of technology. IT people started coming in. They started writing programs where these programs now use AI and algorithms to do a lot of the forecasting and to kick out reports that will tell you this is your age stock or your stock that's about to get expired, which means perhaps there's no job rotation in the warehouse. Okay. And then it's like, it's orders. So everything just kind of got, what's the word I'm looking for? Like through technology, things got a lot easier. But what that allowed is that it also freed up resources to then focus on the most important things. Because while there's AI and AI has come about and it's amazing, AI can copy content or improve that, but it cannot copy creativity. So AI cannot paint because, like that's something that comes from an artist's heart, or like you're a content creator. AI can never take what you do because of your creativity, of where you find a niche and you fill it. And I think it's the same thing. You'll always need the human aspect to it. So like we're a very long way on where we need to go with it. And while it's improved and it frees up resources, these resources can now be used to better be creative in how do we continue to revolutionize or evolution, or where do we get. I mean, if we look at something like back then, there used to be, remember, video stores were like a big thing, right? And what happened to them? I mean, they were amazing. They were everything, right? And like, even if you owned a PlayStation, for instance, you would go. It wasn't just about movies. It was about going to get your little TV game cards and all of that. But they did not evolve with the times, and they didn't get creative. And that's why, like with some of them, like they've actually closed down. But it's all about exactly that. It's like being relevant. And with digitalization, with technology, it'll free up your resources, but let's better use that for other things. So like one of the things I do is I run, well, not run, but I plan for like a manufacturing plant. And so sometimes the hours, depending on sales, maybe next week it will be quieter. So the factory does not need to produce so much. And I say to them, well, instead of putting the staff on short time, let's rather look at developing them. Let's do job rotation. So then instead of this person only being able to do this in this factory, when the factory's quieter, take them and go train them to do something else. So then if somebody has to leave, or, if somebody gets sick, or if there's an emergency, but also then you developing somebody and you're not just being stagnant. All of us want to progress. We, like as human beings, we all don't want to be stuck in the same place. So it's all about like, how are you going to be intentional about skills development, and yes, and like you can choose to say, listen, we're just going to put them on short time, or you can say, no, this week let's clean up the factory, next week let's do skills development, let's just train them to do other things. Skills development can also just sometimes be things like etiquette, like how do you respond in an email. Like, some people will send you emails and not even say hi. It'll just be like your name, comma, and then a whole conversation. And sometimes it's just teaching simple things that make a big difference. And like things that will improve your company. Like instead of saying, oh, I don't know about this person, why do they keep doing this over and over? Okay, when it's quieter, how about you make a list of it and be like, okay guys, today we're going to do strategic planning, we're going to do a workshop, get a few pizzas, get a little platter, some drinks, cool drinks, whatever, sit around, do training. And so yes, AI has improved a lot, but with the time that you have free, let's now look at how can we reutilize that. And sometimes it takes people on the floor to tell you how best to optimize. Like, your on the floor staff would be like, listen, this takes us a long time. Maybe we need to look at an idea. And then you can start brainstorming and looking at, okay, how can we better do things in a company? But sure.
Speaking of human beings, there's AI and then there's humans. That brings me to the question of key performance within your industry. What type of your key performance indicators, what do you guys look at in terms of, because there's technology now aiding everything, how much more responsibility or less responsibility or new responsibility that has an effect on key performance?
I think it would be more responsibilities in a way, because AI has come about, which means it helps in terms of reporting, in terms of all of that. and I made a list of some of the things that you need for KPIs in our field, and it would be problem solving, strong analytical thinking, strategic planning, attention to detail, organizational skills, time management, adaptability and agility. So like if we had to look at, you need to be adaptable, but you need to make peace with the fact that there's always going to be change. And so it's like, you can't be one of those people who's like, I hate change. I can't deal with change, because the economies of scale change. Look at COVID, 1 minute we were all okay and we were great, and then the next minute industries were shut down. 1 minute people were walking into stores buying stuff, and then the next minute everything became online. So even as like a company or as an individual, you have to be agile, but you have to be adaptable. And then one of the main things for me, and the most important, if I could say, skill set that people need to understand is EQ, not just IQ.
Tell me more about that.
EQ, emotional intelligence. So especially being able to be emotionally intelligent under pressure. And it's a huge focus even on my mentorship program, because personally, I believe that emotional intelligence is the key to both personal and professional success. EQ is not taught at tertiaries or in textbooks. EQ is emotionally understanding how to handle people, how to have empathy, how not to snap, how to work under pressure, how not to have that toxic environment, because mental health has also been something that has been, yes, deteriorating significantly, but it's because it comes from people having to work in toxic environments. And some people cannot be like, okay, I don't want this job anymore, I'm just going to leave, because financially we as a country are not where we should be. So like, having emotional intelligence is what actually differentiates a leader, is what I would say. Like, you can get a supervisor, and a supervisor knows we got to do this. But a true leader is one who has emotional intelligence, is one who can understand, like, okay, this is what I need to do. This is the deficiency. It's not about 8 to 4 and you need to come to work at 8 to 4. If somebody says, listen, I'm running a bit late, my kid is not well. Sure, no problem. Let's try and be flexible. How do we accommodate? That's actually where staff retention comes from. It's from having the emotional intelligence to be able to connect with people and be like, okay, I can see you're not doing well, or I can see you've had a rough time. It's okay, work from home, or, like emotional intelligence is, it's something that's absolutely key. And like I said, something I focus on even at my mentorship programs, where I say to them, like, you need to learn how to develop your mind, your will, and your emotions. Also, I think because being a female in a male-dominated industry, if you are the type that cries all the time, then they're going to be like, what are you doing here? And that's why you can't go on to leadership. So as females, we've also got to learn how to harness your emotions. You fight your fight in the boardroom, you go back to your office and you cry after that, and then you pull yourself together and you come out with a smile, or, like whatever it is. But like emotional intelligence, having the ability to not be able to snap, having empathy, having, like being able to read the room, if I could say that, like, okay, this is happening. Okay, this is a bit touchy, or having to have a sandwich where, like, even if you're going to discipline somebody, you call them in and you like, what the sandwich is, you great at what you do, then you go to what they're not good at doing, and then you end with, I'm so glad you're part of my team and I really hope that you can improve on this.